Hello, and welcome to the Raising Risk-Free Teens podcast. I'm your host, Cheryl LaBelle. In this risky world we live in today, we want to equip parents to help their teens avoid unnecessary risk. We'll touch on hot topics of the current culture. We'll talk about sexual risk avoidance and any other important information to keep you informed as a parent. All of our topics are rooted in science, facts, and medical accuracy, not opinion. Thanks for listening and hope you enjoy the podcast. We are picking up with our conversation about recently released data on young adults and their expectations for marriage and how they're actually dating today, which shows that there's a recession in that, meaning that they want something they're not actually working towards. So joining me again is Katie McNealy. We're going to continue this conversation about the data that was presented, but also talk a little bit more about how we can help our young people build some dating resiliency and work on that disconnect from expectations and what is actually happening. Now, as we were prepping for this podcast, I was reminded of a podcast we did last year on dating and what that has looked like for our young adults. And it is interesting to me when I go back and listen to that, some of the things that our guest speakers spoke about or shared in what they've seen and how it kind of connects to these expectations and the dating world. And we recognize too, Katie, you and I, that we have some bias as well from our experiences just because of our age. We're not living in this world and experiencing these things. We didn't even grow up the same way in developing our friendships, let alone romantic relationships. And I don't know about you, but my kids have kind of come to mind as well in some of their dating experiences or what I'm watching play out. So this will be a fun and interesting conversation too.
Right, because even if we didn't grow up in this, we love people who are dealing with it now. Yes. We have people we love who are living it. So what can we do? What do they need? And how can we help?
Yes. So just kind of a recap from some of what we talked about before. A lot of young people want to get married. They are looking forward to that. They want that deep, intimate connection. But they don't really know how to get there. And there are some obstacles that have gotten in the way. So some of that has been, this resiliency. They've had a bad experience. They don't know how to bounce back. Maybe they don't read social cues very well, or even the financial side, that dating is very expensive. Now, there's some more information I wanted to share a little bit too. This marital expectation compared to dating skill gaps in our young adults today. What this article really brings attention to is that we need to teach our young people healthy dating skills and build those. They're not, you and I discussed this, they're not really learning them from the culture around us. We see a lot of instant gratification. We don't have to work that hard at things. And we don't have to practice, as much. And so that then hurts us when we expect a deep, meaningful relationship, and not every relationship's going to turn out that way. So the desires and the attitudes are for sure there for wanting marriage, but how they build human connections, forming those serious relationships, exploring what they want in a future long-term partner, and even that desire for personal growth that comes from these relationships, which is interesting because we do grow through pain and trials, and they're afraid of those. And so if you're avoiding that, you're not going to have that personal growth. There are some reasons, though, that young people are marrying later, not just this dating recession, fewer people dating. And this won't be unfamiliar to us, right? This increased focus on post-secondary education as well as careers. And we've seen a lot of that, a lot of young people. Even my son is 21, and he and his girlfriend too, they've been dating for 5 years, high school sweethearts, still dating and thinking marriage. But even when I talk to him about that, again, they've been dating for 5 years. He's 21, and he's saying, Mom, we're probably not going to get married until after we've graduated college and we've established our careers. And that's interesting to me too, because I think, well, if you know that it's going to work, what's missing is that commitment piece of the marriage vows. If you combine two incomes I would think that would be better than having two separate incomes independently. Now, I'm just picking on that. Not everyone is in that situation. I think that my son is in a unique position because we know a lot of high school sweethearts don't continue to stay together. But we do see a lot of that, right? That focus on education. I also wonder if maybe we've blamed marriage happening later because of that, but I wonder if young adults are having a hard time dating, if the relationship's not there, that's not their focus, they're building their confidence and their value in their career and working towards those goals. So I know that some of them say that's what I'm focusing on instead of a relationship. Is that really what they're focusing on, or is that just how it's actually playing out? Which is okay. Either way is okay, but it is an interesting thought as we look at this. Some other things too, there is this declining emphasis within our culture for the need to be married, right? That you can live together, and laws and life cultural expectations. Someone would say that's a very traditional, even religious view to say, well, you have to be married. And for sure, our society has moved away from that. So our young people feel less of that pressure. And if that's not the expectation, then they can kind of make whatever choices they want, which then makes it so interesting that the majority of these young people actually desire the countercultural results of
Right.
being
That's
married.
what I was literally going to say, that it's the culture's trying to go the direction of you don't need to be married. You don't need to be married. But still so many people desire to be married. So
Yes.
that is really interesting.
Yeah, because I think at our core, we are wired to want to be in that committed relationship with one person, understanding, recognizing it. Not everyone has had the best exposure to what marriage can be or what that means, and so they may not think that's what they want. But I am not surprised that at the core, a lot of people, I think, truly are wired that way. Same thing with friendships. I mean, we can satisfy that in a lot of different ways, but we desire close relationships too with friends, even if it's not romantic. So anyway, but our dating system is broken because our young people are not learning how to date and how to deal with that. We could even say some of the friendship. We have a very lonely, isolated, mental health is a big deal. So I think our young people are struggling in a lot of ways when it comes to relationships and feeling connected, not just, marriage. But we've also said in our last episode, and we'll probably say it again a couple times today, is that it is complicated. There's a lot of systems, a lot of pieces of information and expectations and assumptions at work. So what are some of your thoughts from all of this, right? That they want to be married, but they don't know how. Where do we start?
Right. And that's what I, coming at this conversation with, okay, what do they need and how can we help? Like we've talked about the what, we've talked about the possible why, and then what do they need? And I already said in the last episode too that it can't just be this checklist of here is what you do to date. Because goodness, that is not a one-size-fits-all in any kind of form. So that is not what is needed. What is needed, I would think, at the very basis is what's going to sound like, the cliche answers. But to keep instilling in the young people we love that they are enough, that they are complete without another person, that yes, it's okay still to desire that and want that. And if they want that, we want to support, but that then if they are living their life now with all other kinds of things they are learning and being successful in and desiring and wanting to do, that we keep looking at the whole picture of their experience and helping them point to that instead of if they are having trouble dating or if they're not finding somebody yet and they're wanting to be married, that is not a failure. That is not something that is going to define them. That is not something that in the meantime, we remember when we are talking to people we love, if we know they would desire to have a relationship and be married someday, to talk about what's going on in life. Tell me some things about one of the questions that I have started asking young people in my life, because sometimes I don't want the questions just to be, so how are you? I will start asking, what do you like about your life right now? What do you wish were different? And that starts the conversation in a way that they can tell me some things about some things that are going well and what they want. And then what do you wish were different? That some things that they're struggling with or some things that a direction they're going in. But that kind of conversation of what is happening right now, and then wouldn't that be interesting? You already alluded to it too, but as they are working on different things going on in their life, not just looking for a relationship because that's going to be what completes and identifies them, that would build the confidence for when they do meet somebody or when they are going to put themselves out there, because that's one of the things that it says, even the confidence of approaching somebody they'd be interested in feels really scary. And it does beg the question that I had about this whole thing of, is this an entirely new experience that is happening to this generation, or is this always how it's been? We just haven't talked about it before. And we just think that, well, that's just how it's supposed to be, and they can figure it out on their own, and I had to figure it out the hard way, so just let them, instead of, no, let's just talk about it, that what is actually happening.
Well, and the fewer of their peers are dating and having these relationships, they're not learning from their friends. And again, if we're not seeing this practiced in the media, and again, some speculation here, but when you look at what's influencing us through media, not just music, but I mean, whether it's online social media, TikToks, Instagram, that kind of thing, it's very rapid. If we're watching television, a lot of the things that are gaining traction are reality shows and dating shows, and they are extreme, where you jump in, have this crazy experience, immediately you're connected and super emotionally, in tune with each other. But it's really because of the extreme adrenaline and emotions released through this, what sometimes could be considered a traumatic experience, even if it seems positive. We don't get to see what happens after the TV shows where the couples hook up and connect. And then they start to find that, hey, we actually don't have anything in common. We don't, it was just a physical attraction. Or as we mentioned in our last episode with dating apps, how people become, or relationships become, consumable items, right? And you slide left or swipe right. I remember eHarmony, that was such a big deal because it was supposed to really fill out this whole intake about your personality and try to match you with someone who you would be more compatible with, at a deeper level. But that's not, I don't see advertisements for that. I see a lot more advertisements for the apps where it's a picture. Are you attracted? Are you not? And it's this quick scrolling back and forth. And as you had mentioned, is there something better out there? Mm-hmm. Well, that really gives this idea of there's something better out there. So why should I settle here? When we know relationships aren't perfect, even in marriage, it's not perfect. Sometimes it's hard and it takes time. Now, the difference between dating and marriage is that commitment piece, right? That you're committed to each other and so you're going to make this work. But even in that dating relationship, just because it feels like it's not working out, we need people in our lives, right? To help us to talk through it, to say, this is normal. Or once you say this out loud and talk about it with me, it was ride or die in your relationship. You're ready to break up over this thing. But as you're talking to other people about it, you start to realize, oh, that sounds really silly. Or, yes, I hear myself now because I don't have as much emotionally invested in you. I can say these things more objectively. That's how we grow. If we don't have those people in our lives, and for our young people, they don't even realize that they need to be talking about it with others, that they need to get some input. The benefits, that's why I say need. There are so many benefits. That's going to be personal growth right there, and to admit, well, I'm wrong, or I'm looking for the wrong thing in a relationship, but if we're not having those conversations or creating that safe space for our young people or our young adults to even know it's an option, how do they grow?
Right, practicing that intimacy piece of that you can say the things that you can say, and that you learn that that's actually what helps build the intimacy. We can be so afraid. We were talking earlier of listening to a past podcast we did about the dating culture, and Lydia, our coworker, wonderful coworker, talked about how she is involved in the lives of teenage girls and youth, and talking about how just giving permission and empowering to say no, or to say, this is not working, or to say, I don't want to do this. We can become so people-pleasing and others-focused in a terrible way, a toxic way. There's a servant attitude and wanting to think of others first, but that is not this. So when we talk about this part of practicing that intimacy, and that earlier podcast, when you would say, actually saying what is true and real and genuine builds the intimacy. And we can be so afraid of hurting feelings, or we can be so afraid that we're not supposed to say that, or we can't, or we've never practiced. But that's why it's so important what we've said all along. Yes, there's trouble with dating, but it could be the underlying that we're not maybe practicing real intimacy with people in our lives of being able to say the things. So then that kind of practice, then when we get into a dating relationship, that we're not just thinking, oh, I'm supposed to act like this and say this, that I can't hurt feelings, that I can't do anything. We have already practiced saying some uncomfortable things and realizing that it can be met with deeper intimacy. If it's in a healthy spot, that can be a whole other podcast. But that is something that is needing practice. And that's when there needs to be people in their lives. I need to be practicing this with young people I love in real ways. Saying some uncomfortable things or telling them experiences of when I had to say uncomfortable things and then experienced how that actually deepened relationships. It didn't turn it off. It deepens the intimacy.
It almost comes down to relationships. I mean, friendship too. Like, do our young people even know how to develop and have comfortable friendships? Because if that should be where you're also practicing how to say the hard things or to be able to set boundaries for yourself or that value too, that we see that value in ourselves. So we feel comfortable and confident enough to say, I'm worth this and saying this. And I hope that you also see the value in yourself and in our friendship, that if we have a disagreement, we can talk through it and come out better for that personal growth. So that is an interesting piece, looking at romantic relationships and tying it back to just healthy friendships. And I think if we were doing a dating boot camp, I mean, you could even start as basic as just interactions. How do you communicate, right? How do you recognize your ethical side? What is important to me? What are my boundaries? What are my values? What am I working towards? And if someone else is not going to receive that, that might be a really good thing to recognize. And it's going to hurt, but maybe we should part ways because we're going to have a lot more hurt and trouble along the way if we can't figure it out now. And then another piece, talking about money being an obstacle with dating. So I love when we go into the classrooms and talk to our high schoolers, we try to help them build a toolkit, right? Like not just what values or what things are you looking for in a romantic partner, what qualities, character qualities, but also, ways to show affection that's not just physical, because for sure, physical intimacy is going to release chemicals in the brain and there are going to be connections and is going to feel like a deeper relationship, and that is a wonderful piece to relationships. But if you don't have that foundation ahead of time, there's going to be more disappointment, right? All right, that's a whole nother conversation. But then we also talk to them about some healthy dating ideas. And this cracks me up sometimes. Our young people will have some really great ideas. And I'm thinking as they're sharing these, yes, but that would cost a lot of money. Or yes, that is a really great idea, but you don't make that much money. There's no way that you could actually execute that. I have to chuckle a little bit too because my youngest son just graduated high school and he has been hired in. He has a trade. That's his skill. And so he's been hired into a full-time position and he is getting paychecks that are more money than anything he's ever had before. And he has a girlfriend. And so he decided that he was going to take her out for a very nice fancy date. And they went to a local Japanese hibachi restaurant. And I mean, he went all out. They each got their own sushi roll for an appetizer. And I think he also got some scallops. And then they each did the hibachi meal. And so afterwards, he's like, with tip, he goes, Mom, it was like $200. Yes, it was. Now, again, this was a special moment. He wanted to do it. He blew through a good portion of his paycheck. And that's fine. It's a good learning experience. But to say that was fun, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And they've been dating for a while too. This wasn't like a first date. If that was a first date, man, that would set the bar really high, right? In talking about this podcast, even you and I were saying, because it's summer right now as we're recording this, I went to the fair. You have to pay for parking to get into the fair. The prices at the fair have gone up significantly because food costs, I mean, economy, all of that, and everyone's looking to make a profit. Just to buy a snack, let alone a meal, can be anywhere from like $10 to $20 per person. And then let's say you've looked at all of the exhibits and all of the farm animals and whatever. Now you want to do the midway. Again, more snacks, more tickets. It adds up very, very quickly. Parking is the least of your expenses at this point. So we do have students that'll say, oh, go to the fair. Well, you can still do that, but you maybe need to have some conversation to set that expectation of like, hey, let's go check things out. But maybe we'll eat dinner someplace else first before Taco Bell. That's going to be, you could go to a nice sit-down restaurant and get more food for the price that you would spend with tip than at the fairgrounds. But so we have to think a little bit more around that. What is the expectation? And yeah, it is expensive to date. And if you're not comfortable having open conversations with your date about money or finding the things that you enjoy, it's going to be harder. So you find ways to find what do you like? You don't always have to go out. It can be stream a movie or put a puzzle together or have a game night or hang out with friends and maybe that's not conducive for everyone or that is a little intimidating, but we can get creative. You can get to know the other person better too to find out what they like. How do you create a date that's outside the basic dinner and a movie or an event? And if we're watching TV and we're watching reality shows or whatever that influence is, man, the picture that's painting for young people is that it's got to be great. It's got to be amazing. And it's got to be expensive and it's got to be grandiose and just, takeout or Taco Bell and a picnic. Like that's boring. It doesn't have to be. You can make it very interesting.
And it just feeds into the all or nothing, that it must be this huge thing or it doesn't count or matter. Like you said, I'm always encouraged in the high school classes when they say, go for a walk when they get there themselves.
Yes.
Like you can go for a walk. And that's, of course, what I also encourage them. And absolutely, when you go for a walk, that's when you can have the conversations that you're not making this, uncomfortable eye contact, bringing up something that might make you feel a little uncomfortable. You could say some things when you're walking next to somebody instead of when you're at a booth, like just staring at them and trying not to look directly as you bring up.
Yes.
So even encouraging some creativity, encouraging them. I always feel, though, even when in conversations about our jobs and on here, there is a tension of, I want to remember that some teenagers are going to look at us and say, seriously, you don't know anything.
Yes.
So we've always got to keep that tension of, I just want to help you think of some ideas, play board games together and with friends. We say you'll learn a lot about somebody by how they win or lose.
Yes.
You hang out with each other's families. Pay attention to how they interact. You learn a lot from somebody. So even just those kinds of things that don't cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Bake something using ingredients that are in one of your homes that you're dating. Those are some more practical ways, but when it says that a significant barrier to dating is money, then we do need to be willing to have the conversations and pay attention to when they don't want to have the conversations with us, but to have the conversations of let's think of other ways that you could spend time together and get to know each other. And in the long run, on this side of things, you understand that is truly where you learn and build the intimacy instead of how much money can I spend on a date. And
well, that comes back to how well do we communicate and how comfortable am I communicating? Because, kind of that cliche saying, that joke, you see all these teens that are friends or even they're on a date and they're sitting in public at a table and they're all staring at their phones and no one is having conversation with each other. So that begs the question, do you know how to relate to other people? And if we're going to pick on technology a little bit, let's boost technology up to where it can be a positive thing. I bet we could Google questions to ask on a first date or ideas of things that we can do that don't cost money. Give me a random list of ingredients and a task that we have to do. And if someone else, I know you got to have the right personalities for that, right? And the comfort level. And if you don't have a lot of confidence in yourself, then maybe you feel silly suggesting it. So there again, how can we work on ourselves and boost that up? But if we can't say the things we need to say to that other person, then maybe they're not your person. And so we could avoid that fear of rejection and those horrible experiences. But let's talk a little bit about that. Someone has a bad experience dating. There's hurt. There's rejection. What can we do to encourage and help build them back up to get at it again?
I think even as you're talking and as we are thinking of how to practice intimacy, and my mind just keeps working backwards. Again, it's not just a checklist of how can we fix this dating recession? We've got to keep going back and back and back to the foundation, and even intimacy and friendships. But as we are doing a podcast that's talking raising risk-free teens and wanting to be people that are advocating and supporting and helping young people in our lives we love, then it's also got to start in our homes. Now, that will not always be, goodness.
Doesn't always translate.
Correct. That is, I hope that the nuance is always there. Of that is also not just a check a box. Make sure your home is safe first, because that is not always the case. But making sure that even those of us that would be wanting to be the safe people for young people are paying attention to that too, for young people that don't have that in their homes. That's why we need trusted adults who we don't always live with. Yeah. But practicing that safety first, of being able to say the things, modeling it, that many of us, it was never modeled for us or practiced or experienced or talked about, or saying, having the safe spot that it doesn't always need to be us. Please find someone else to talk to. Let's talk about who you could talk to. So it's practicing those kinds of conversations first in our own home, and then giving them time and space. I just keep coming back to, what do they need and how can we help? If they have experienced a terrible breakup, if they have experienced emotional things, our biggest thing that I think could help them is to let them experience it. Not try to always at the very beginning make it go away, or even be part of the process that would just help numb it instead of helping them deal. Or now there is, like let's decompress. Let's escape into something. There's, again,
That's part
nuanced.
of the healing process
nuanced.
too.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the time and space of that, validate this is normal and okay, what you are experiencing and feeling. Let's talk through what could have gone differently. What would you hope could be different? What do you hope could be? And instill that hope.
Reset that mind, or reframe that mindset, because if the hurt has happened to the person, we feel like we have no control. Maybe it wasn't my fault, or maybe I did do a thing, but it escalated and snowballed and however that situation turned out. I agree. You allow them to feel the feelings. We don't need to protect them from that, because that's part of that personal growth, right? We don't grow unless we have some hardships. But from there, I think every person's going to be different, but if we want to try to help them find ways, we all need a sense of control, right? So now I'm afraid to get into another relationship because I can't control the outcome. Well, let's look at the things that we can control, if that's a way that we need to frame this. What did I do? How did I react? Was it a valid reason why we broke up? Even if you think that it wasn't, okay, so what can we be doing? What can we be learning about ourselves? What can we be learning about the kind of person we're attracted to, or those character qualities? Maybe that's a red flag. Maybe it's not that deep. But for others, if they do need more of that security, or if they feel like someone wronged them, let's talk about that a little bit. But what were the great things about it? So was that really worth a breakup? I mean, we can't change it now, but again, if you want that personal growth, how can we talk through that? Sometimes knowing the things it's harder to deal with than it is to grow us. But I think those are conversations to help them not just live in that fear of rejection or whatever pain, hurt might be there, but how do you grow through it? I guess maybe our young people struggle with how to grow through the hurt because they do live in somewhat of a sheltered world. I mean, they're exposed to a lot of stuff. So you could argue with me about that, but when it comes to their emotions, you can find anyone that agrees with your opinion, even if your opinion is wrong. There are so many voices out there. And in some ways that doesn't strengthen our young people to be more committed to what they believe. They're more committed. Well, other people believe me and they follow me. So I don't have to really work on my words or my language or why I believe this. I'm supported. And that's, again, a beauty of technology that connects us in so many ways socially, but also a downfall. It doesn't strengthen us. It doesn't refine us through the fire of trial and tribulation.
Right. Safe, trusted people don't just always agree with us.
Yeah.
That is not the purpose. And so when we also need story and experience. And I alluded to that in like, what is missing? Why would this be happening? In the last podcast we talked about, but not to hijack. We would need to do it in an appropriate way, not to hijack their experience and just immediately take over. Well, this happened to me. But at some point also talk about lived experiences. We are genuinely can be so bolstered by the people around us when we hear what they've gone through, what they've experienced, what they did, and how they moved forward. Mm-hmm. And so to be willing to be genuine, especially because we are talking about teenagers and young adults.
Yes.
We can talk about a lot of things with teenagers and young adults. We do not need to be so worried that we would be sharing things that they can't handle yet or that they don't know. They need genuine, real examples of people ahead of them that have made it through and what they did, and to support them and to have a safe place to land when bad things do happen.
And sometimes things just suck. They just do, and they just hurt, and we can't rationalize it away or, make it better. And that's part of life too, but it is what grows us. So,
and it just takes time.
Yes. I think we've had a lot of really great conversation around this and probably inspired some other thoughts and ideas for our listeners too, as they look at their personal lives or those relationships, and maybe even thinking about what helped us along the way that we could impart to others, but getting creative too and trying to understand why it is so hard for some of our young people. Even in my own family with all three of my children, all three of them are very different. And sometimes that personality just, one child is bolder in their relationships and has no fear, and the other one has had some experiences that have shaped them and honestly live in that fear sometimes. And it's just taking some time with maturity to really get past that and safely work on some new relationships. So it's, there is no one and done perfect answer. How do you create the space for that growth and walk alongside, if possible?
That would be the goal that we want so badly. That's why we do what we do. That's what we are hoping to be talking about through this podcast. How do we support and walk alongside and always help them move forward?
Yeah, I think that's great. Thanks so much, Katie. This has been a great conversation, and I hope our listeners will continue to mull it over and grow and lead and guide in their relationships too. Hey, thanks for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Clarity of Central Indiana. We hope you enjoyed today's topic. Be sure to leave us a review and share with your friends. You can find any links mentioned in the episode notes. Always remember that you have value, you have worth, you matter.